Okay, this is the introduction of design of experiments. I'm going to start this by ragging on classic experiments. Usually what happens, I'm going to use my grandmother's cinnamon rolls as an example. Grandma used to just change one factor at a time. Oh, I wonder what would happen if I add a little bit more cinnamon rolls, or cinnamon to the cinnamon rolls. Oh, she goes, oh, that worked out nice. Or she says, maybe I'll just add a little bit different butter, or maybe I'll change it to margarine and see what happens. But every time you do that, every time she changes one of the ingredients, it requires a lot of experiments to get the results, to see what makes the best cinnamon rolls. And there's a combination, right? Because I'm sure the cinnamon, the sugar, and the butter all interacted with each other, but by changing one at a time, she didn't know how those variables worked in combination with each other. She was ignoring the interaction between those three factors. And her conclusions might be wrong or misleading. So if she added just a little bit more cinnamon and she thought it tasted better, she goes, man, I'm going to add a whole bunch of cinnamon because a little is good, a whole bunch is better. So it might be misleading. Also, if it's non-statistical experiments, it might be inconclusive. In other words, um, we don't know for sure if it's just an anomaly or what. And we may totally miss the important variables, such as maybe we need a little bit more brown sugar, and a little bit less refined sugar. We might miss those kind of variables. Oh, and by the way, my grandmother made some great cinnamon rolls, despite not using design of experiments. So with grandma's cinnamon rolls, what would have been the advantages if she got the recipe through design of experiments? Well, she could evaluate many factors simultaneously. She wouldn't have to just look at just cinnamon or butter or brown sugar individually. She could do them all together at the same time. And if there's uncontrollable factors such as the temperature of the oven or maybe what type of season, she might be able to come up with a recipe that's robust and tastes good no matter what the noise is. It wouldn't require a lot of math sometimes to get the benefits. You basically get the results. Oh, okay, this is where I do the best and just run with it, right? And it takes relatively few experiments. You can imagine how many times she'd have to do an experiment if she's just changing the cinnamon, how many different experiments she had to do to see what the optimum is. And she could be confident of the results because balanced design, in other words, we don't change the amount of the input variables or the factors. We just basically just say, okay, we can keep it the same or a couple different levels, and we can be confident of the results. So we can optimize, right? And overlooked factors will be indicated. So if we get some results, say, well, something's going on here, but it doesn't make sense. We're missing something. Well, it'll become obvious in DOE. And with computers now, oh my, it's a lot easier than it used to be back in the old days. And often you can improve without additional cost. For example, we were looking at a new machine to measure our spools. We had to keep a 50 millionths tolerance in the old factory. But through DOE, we were able to figure out, no, we don't have to do that. We can get the results we need just by controlling these factors in our measurement system. So we avoid the cost, which is about $35,000 for a new instrument. And that's one of the advantages of DOE. Now, there's a lot of terms. DOE has a language of its own, and I'm not going to go over the glossary, but in the reading, you'll see a list of DOE terms. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask in the discussion part. So when do we use a DOE? Well, we got a choice between alternatives. We used to use this quite a bit when a salesman would come in and say he's got a new uh, material we should try or a new product we should try in our process. We'd be able to evaluate that. If you want to figure out the key factors affecting the response, right? So again, my grandmother's cinnamon rolls, she might want to try, I don't know, the brand of butter she uses. That might not be a key factor. And she'd be able to identify that if she used DOE. But you can start to model this thing mathematically. You can hit a certain target. What do you want the result to be, right? You can reduce variability. You can just make the same way all the time. You can maximize or minimize the response, whatever you need. You can make the process more robust. In other words, it's tough to screw it up. And you can do any or all of the above in combination, right? You don't just have to focus on one. So what are the steps in DOE? First of all, you have to know what you want to achieve. What are your objectives? And after you do that, you say, well, select the variables. Again, you might use something like a fishbone diagram, just brainstorm. You don't want a whole lot of variables, but enough so that you can figure out. And if you've been doing this for a while, talk to the operators. They know what the variables are. Select the experimental design, and we're going to talk about that later on. Do the experiments, do all the runs, verify the consistency of the data, make sure there's not something weird going on with one of the runs or something like that. Analyze it, and I'm going to put in a little bit of a plug for Minitab. You can do that. Minitab does this very well. There are other programs out there. Excel has a good one also. And but if you're just going to do the basic DOEs, I recommend just use Excel. Don't spend the money on Minitab. And then you use results. One to prove the process, or you can use that for a jumping off point for evolutionary operations and do a couple of DOEs so you can optimize it even more. So what do you want to consider when you're doing a DOE? First of all, you want to make sure that your gauges are good. Do an MSA first. You don't want faulty data, and keep it simple. The less factors, the less levels you have, the easier it is to do the experiments and less time it will take. First of all, make sure it's feasible. There's an experiment they want to do. It's going to cost them like about $4,000 each time they did a run. And I won't get into it. It's part of DOD. No, keep it feasible. All right, it's got to be something that's doable. If you have a change in the noise, for example, let's say you did one run in the morning and the next one in the afternoon and the temperature changed. That'd be noise that you didn't account for. And watch out for unexpected events. We're actually doing an experiment, and a train went by the factory and just shook everything up. And it kind of ruined one of our experiments. Also, buy-in. If you don't have management, operator, or anything else buy-in, you can find out all the data you want, but it probably won't be successful. And people won't change if they don't really believe there's a need to change. And also take ownership of the experiment. Somebody's got to be responsible for this thing. Save all the raw data that you collect. Record everything. If you can even videotape the experiments as you're doing it, that's beautiful, all right? And then lastly, don't forget to reset the equipment after the experiment. You're changing some process, especially if you're using production processes. Don't change something and not change it back to the way it was. You don't want that to screw up your processes. Okay, let's talk a bit about residuals. Residuals are experimental error, and this is how much our results vary from what we predicted. And that prediction can come from a couple of things. One is a mathematical model, or from previous experiments, or from repeating or replicating experiments. But this is how much this thing varies. The results vary from what we expect. But we want these things to be well behaved. By well behaved, if we see how much this thing varies from what we predicted, plot them out in a histogram, calculate the bell curve. It should make a nice even bell curve. This is a well behaved residual. This is what we're looking for. If we don't have that, we've got some explaining to do. The interactions. This could be a very lengthy subject. So what I've done is I've made an attachment and a video. The attachment is actually a DOE template, Excel based, and the video explains what's happening in the template as an example. And in that video, I also explain interactions and how to interpret them. It's very graphic. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask them in the discussion. I'll be glad to talk more. There's a lot of different types of DOE designs. We still have the one factor at a time. That's actually a design. And I've got a list of about 5 here, or 4, and plus there's many others. I used to teach all these, right, what they were. But in 20 years, I've never seen anybody use anything but Taguchi. If you're interested in any of these, go to the internet, take a look at it. And if the Taguchi doesn't work for you, give me give me an email or put in discussions, and we'll look at the alternatives. But there's a lot of DOE designs. We're just going to focus on Taguchi is all, orthogonal arrays. Fractional designs, and I'm going to focus on Taguchi here. In fact, I'm not even going to talk about it in the presentation. I made a video and I put it in the readings and also in the discussion. But basically all you're going to do is you're going to sacrifice knowledge about the interactions so you can do fewer runs. It's very convenient, especially if the runs are expensive. But look in the discussions and in the readings. Up till now, we've just been talking about 2 levels on whatever factors we have. If you want to, you can go up even more levels, 3, 4, 5, in theory up to almost infinity. When you got 2 levels, you basically got like a square block. You think it's like 3-dimensional, but all you know are the corners. You add that 3rd level, you get to know what happens between the corners. And you get a better feel for what's happening within that space. It's possible to analyze it a bit or optimize it better. I'm not going to go into that much. I can't find a good video on it. If you need to do a 3-level or you think a 3-level would be beneficial to you, email me and we'll walk through it together. It's possible to do in Excel. Minitab does this also if you want to use Minitab and a couple other programs. But it is possible to do in Excel. If you need to do it, contact me. So after you do your DOE,